Velkommen til min kanal, Xenobu. Den her dokumentarserie er et forsøg på at sætte ord og tanker på nogle af de bekymringer, jeg har, når det kommer til teknologien, og mere specifikt den måde, teknologiens manipulerende mekanismer påvirker os alle sammen. Vi lever lige nu midt i en historisk tid. Den mest opsigtsvækkende og betydningsfulde tid siden 9/11, hvor vi står over for den største udfordring for menneskets mentale og spirituelle helbred, vi har set i den her moderne tidsalder. Vi er alle en del af et verdensomspændende eksperiment, drevet af tusindvis af manipulerende og desorienterende mekanismer, hvor vi alle er fanget i et alt dominerende teknokratisk styre. Så er det os, der styrer teknologien, eller teknologien, der styrer os.
What is this? Oh boy, somebody hasn't left the house in a while. If somebody knows this woman, could you please invite her out somewhere? Anywhere. The park, the thrift store, the mailbox. She needs something to do. What are people even doing with their lives anymore? Has anyone even invented anything the past 5 years? You know, aside from new ways to look like an asshole. I mean, just think of all you can achieve as a human being. Then take a look at this one. How many hours making videos of herself in a room do you think it took to get to the point she's at now, where she's recording herself having a self-induced stroke? Let's just take this in for a moment. Keep in mind there's someone out there right now training to be the next Michael Jordan, but we all know that's just a waste of time. We're already looking at the real prodigy. There's not an athlete, artist, musician, architect, or scientist on this planet that could ever produce the level of innovation TikTok and Tammy's about to share with us. All those years of TikToking are finally gonna pay off, and here it is.
Party where the motherfucking drugs is. I can't fuck that hoe unless that bitch on me to see.
Whoa.
Taking this shit out this bitch and I'm talking my shit cause you know I can coach.
Here it is, folks, the evolution of Generation Z. What a legacy they're building. Do you realize if you sent a VHS copy of that to the news in 1992, it'd be showcased on the evening news as an opening to their lead story on how the drug epidemic in America is affecting our children? They'd have no idea she was sober. Now it's showcased and praised on social media as some sort of talent. Oh yeah, I'm not making this stuff up. Look, do you guys know how hard it is to make a TikTok like that in one go? I don't know. Do you know how hard it is to be a coal miner? Do you even think about these things before you use the phrase, do you know how hard it is? I just saw the transition video. WTH. You're so talented. Damn. Yeah, I wonder if the members of Led Zeppelin feel the same way. I mean, am I the only one concerned about our future here? These kids are going to be running for public office soon. I mean, look at this kid. Guy can't even walk right. I mean, the kid spent the day choreographing himself, waving to an imaginary friend, walking like he has arthritis, and rolling imaginary dice. I mean, what is the purpose of this? I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but pretending you're disabled isn't cool, Billy. I mean, what was the next video gonna be? You crawling into the room like you lost your legs in the war? Then all of a sudden you just pretend to shoot a basketball? We're all confused by your performance art, Billy. Maybe someday one of these kids will pick up an instrument or write something that inspires this planet. Oh wait, here's somebody. 425 followers on Instagram. What do you know? Nobody cares. The human Pop-Tart twins, on the other hand, sweeping the nation with 32 million. Things sure are looking bright.
En af de personer, der inspirerede mig til den her dokumentarserie, er Dr. Joe Dispenza. Han forklarer, at tanker skaber en biokemisk reaktion i hjernen, som udløser kemiske signaler. Og de kemiske signaler får din krop til at føle præcis på den måde, som du netop lige har tænkt.
The habit is when you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it better than your mind. So if you think about it, people wake up in the morning, they begin to think about their problems. Those problems are circuits of memories in the brain. Each one of those memories are connected to people and things at certain times and places. And if the brain is a record of the past, the moment they start their day, they're already thinking in the past. Each one of those memories has an emotion. Emotions are the end product of past experiences. So the moment they recall those memories of their problems, they all of a sudden feel unhappy, they feel sad, they feel pain. Now, how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So the person's entire state of being when they start their day is in the past. So what does that mean? The familiar past will sooner or later be predictable future. So if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, and you can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, by very definition of emotions, you're thinking in the past. And for the most part, you're going to keep creating the same life. So then people grab their cell phone, they check their WhatsApp, they check their text, they check their emails, they check Facebook, they take a picture of their feet, they post it on Facebook, they tweet something, they do Instagram, they check the news, and now they feel really connected to everything that's known in their life. And then they go through a series of routine behaviors. They get out of bed on the same side, they go to the toilet, they get a cup of coffee, they take a shower, they get dressed, they drive to work the same way, they do the same things, they see the same people, they push the same emotional buttons, and that becomes the routine, and it becomes like a program. So now they've lost their free will to a program, and there's no unseen hand doing it to them. So when it comes time to change, the redundancy of that cycle becomes a subconscious program. So now 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a computer program. So then a person can say with their 5% of their conscious mind, I want to be healthy, I want to be happy, I want to be free. But the body's on a whole different program. So then how do you begin to make those changes? Well, you have to get beyond the analytical mind, because what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And that's where meditation comes in, because you can teach people through practice how to change their brainwaves, slow them down. And when they do that properly, they do enter the operating system where they can begin to make some really important changes. So most people then wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis. They wait for loss, some tragedy to make up their mind to change. And my message is, why wait? And you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. And I think right now, the cool thing is that people are waking up.
Vores tanker påvirker altså vores mentale velvære og vores krop fysisk i større eller mindre grad. Hvad enten det er positive eller negative tanker. Vi kender det alle sammen fra, når vi glæder os til noget bestemt. Det kan give os en fysisk reaktion i kroppen, som sommerfugle i maven eller ondt i maven, når vi bliver nervøse.
If you're not being defined by a vision of the future, then you're left with the old memories of the past, and you will be predictable in your life. And if you wake up in the morning and you're not being defined by a vision in the future, as you see the same people and you go to the same places and you do the exact same thing at the exact same time, it's no longer that your personality is creating your personal reality. Now your personal reality is affecting or creating your personality. Your environment is really controlling how you think and feel unconsciously, because every person, everything, every place, every experience has a neurological network in your brain. Every experience that you have with every person produces an emotion. So some people will use their boss to reaffirm their addiction to judgment. They'll use their enemy to reaffirm their addiction to hatred. They'll use their friends to reaffirm their addiction to suffering. So now they need the outer world to feel something. So To change then is to be greater than your environment, to be greater than the conditions in your world, and the environment is that seductive. So then, why is meditation the tool? Well, let's sit down, let's close our eyes, let's disconnect from your outer environment. So if you're seeing less things, there's less stimulation going to your brain. If you're playing soft music or you have earplugs in, less sensory information coming to your brain, so you're disconnecting from your environment. If you can sit your body down and tell it to stay like an animal, stay right here. I'm going to feed you when we're done. You can get up and check your emails, you can do all your texts, but right now, you're going to sit there and obey me. So then, when you do that properly, and you're not eating anything or smelling anything or tasting anything, you're not up experiencing and feeling anything, you would have to agree with me that you're being defined by a thought, right? So when the body wants to go back to its emotional past, and you become aware that your attention is on that emotion, and where you place your attention is where you place your energy, you're siphoning your energy out of the present moment into the past, and you become aware of that. And you settle your body back down in the present moment, because it's saying, well, it's 8 o'clock. You normally get upset because you're in traffic around this time. And here you are sitting, and we're used to feeling anger, and you're off schedule. Oh, it's 11 o'clock, and you usually check your emails and judge everybody. Well, the body's looking for that predictable chemical state. Every time you become aware that you're doing that, and your body is craving those emotions, and you settle it back down into the present moment, you're telling the body, it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. And now your will is getting greater than the program. And if you keep doing this over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, just like training a stallion or a dog, it's just going to say, I'm going to sit. And the moment that happens, when the body's no longer the mind, when it finally surrenders, there's a liberation of energy. We go from particle to wave, from matter to energy, and we free ourselves from the chains of those emotions that keep us in the familiar past. And we've seen this thousands of times. In fact, we can actually predict it now on a brain scan.
Den teknologiske udvikling har uden tvivl været med til at forbedre vores liv og vores verden på rigtig mange områder. Og vi kan selvfølgelig få masser af gavn af teknologien. Jeg kan bare ikke lade være med at tænke på, hvordan det påvirker os alle sammen mentalt, fysisk og psykisk, og hvordan påvirker det fundamentalt hele den verden, vi lever i. Tristan Harris, som er ekspert inden for den digitale verden, taler åbent omkring de bekymringer, han har, når det kommer til teknologien, men særligt den indflydelse, som sociale medier har på os alle sammen. Han har gjort det til sin mission at oplyse folk omkring de mere negative sider, der desværre også er, når det kommer til de sociale medier. Han påpeger, at de her negative sider kan have en meget stærk negativ effekt på vores mentale og fysiske velvære. Og jeg tror blandt andet, det er noget af det her, vi bliver nødt til at være meget mere opmærksomme på.
Well, there's a really common misconception that technology is neutral and it's up to us to just choose how to use it. And so we're sitting there and we're scrolling and we find ourselves in this kind of wormhole, and then we say, oh man, like I should really have more self-control. And that's partially true, but what we forget when we talk about it that way is that there's 1,000 engineers on the other side of the screen whose job it was to get my finger to do that the next time. And there's this whole playbook of techniques that they use to get us to keep using the software more. So was design always this manipulative? It wasn't always this way. In fact, back in the 1970s and the early 80s at Xerox PARC, when Steve Jobs first went over and saw the graphical user interface, the way people talked about computers and what computers were supposed to be was a bicycle for our minds. That here we are, you take a human being, and they have a certain set of capacities and capabilities. And then you give them a bicycle, and they can go to all these new distances. They're empowered to go to these brand new places and to do these new things, to have these new capacities. And that's always been the philosophy of people who make technologies. How do we create bicycles for our minds to do and empower us to feel and access more? Now, when the first iPhone was introduced, it was also the philosophy of the technology. How do we empower people to do something more? And in those days, it wasn't manipulative because there was no competition for attention. Photoshop wasn't trying to maximize how much attention it took from you. It didn't measure its success that way. And the internet overall had been in the very beginning not designed to maximize attention. It was just putting things out there, creating these message boards. It wasn't designed with this whole persuasive psychology that emerged later. What happened is that the attention economy and this race for attention got more and more competitive. And the more competitive it got to get people's attention on, say, a news website, the more they need to add these design principles, these more manipulative design tactics, as ways of holding on to your attention. And so YouTube goes from being a more neutral, honest tool of just here's a video to, oh, do you want to see these other videos? And oh, do you want to autoplay the next video? And oh, do you want to, here's some notifications. These products start to look and feel more like media that's about maximizing consumption and less like bicycles for our mind.
Det er virkelig gået stærkt, når det kommer til teknologien og hele den digitale verden. Det kan være svært at gennemskue konsekvenserne af alt det her. Det handler selvfølgelig til dels om selvkontrol, når det kommer til alle de her digitale ydelser og tjenester, men det er desværre bare ikke så enkelt. Bagsiden ved de sociale medier er blandt andet, at tusindvis af ingeniører sidder bag skærmen, som er uddannet og specialiseret i at manipulere os til at bruge de her tjenester og ydelser, så ofte som muligt, så meget som muligt og så længe som overhovedet muligt. Det er meget sjældent til vores fordel. Det er en forretning, som kun har ét mål. Det er selvfølgelig at tjene penge. Så er et produkt eller en ydelse gratis, så er du højst sandsynligt produktet.
And I think that's such a subtle and important thing to recognize, is that more and more of technology is really not on our team to help us spend our time the way we want to. It's more on the team of maximizing how much time we spend on the screen. Right now, the only way to succeed in the App Store is by proving you're really good at getting people's attention. And so by making attention the currency of success, it forces all of these good-hearted, good-intentioned people who make apps or make media sites to do things that they don't want to do just because they have to get attention. You have meditation apps that have to send you all these notifications and add streaks and do all this gamey stuff just to get you to use it the most, as opposed to having the phone itself recognize that there's parts of your life where meditation might want to be at the top of the list for you because you're defining that. And so that meditation app could win for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. So we always worry about new technologies when they first appear. You know, when people started bringing out the newspapers on the subway, people worried, oh my God, people are going to stop talking to each other on the subway. And then TV showed up and people worried, oh my God, people are going to spend all this time at home. And the radio, we always worry. And then somehow it seems to turn out okay. Or we worry when back in the 1970s, people were at home on the telephone and calling each other all the time. We thought, oh, the kids these days, what are they doing to their minds, right? So now it's tempting to say, well, now the kids these days, they're on Snapchat. And therefore, we survived all those other technology transitions. Nothing really bad happened. So maybe it's all okay. This is just kids being kids in a new way. And I want to talk about why that's not true, and why this is different. What's different is that, let's take that telephone example. In the 1970s, if someone picked up a telephone to go call their friend and they spent time gossiping on the telephone, we could do that, that's fine. But the telephone wasn't updated every day with new manipulative design principles to be better and better at seducing you into calling your friends. So what's different with Snapchat is that there was 1,000 engineers every single day who work on the product to actually find new ways, not just to get you to use it, but to kind of tag you both on the shoulder and try to get you into a reciprocity relationship where you owe someone else a response.
Helt fra starten af, der var telefonen kun programmeret til, at vi kunne ringe til hinanden og senere sende beskeder til hinanden. I dag der ser vi konsekvent, at vi bliver tvunget til at indgå i den ene byttehandel efter den anden, når vi bruger mobilen eller når vi er på nettet. Mobilen består i dag af tusindvis af manipulerende softwares og designs, som er programmeret systematisk til at holde på vores opmærksomhed. Og vores opmærksomhed, den er guld værd. Så har vi ingen anelse om, hvor vi er på vej hen i det her teknokratiske styre. Hvordan skulle vi så nogensinde kunne finde vej?
It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease, long-term effects. Human beings, because of the size of the neocortex, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems and turn on those chemicals. That means then our thoughts could make us sick. So if it's possible that our thoughts could make us sick, is it possible then our thoughts could make us well? The answer is absolutely yes. You have a thought and then the program runs. But it's the emotion that follows the thought. If you have a fearful thought, you're going to feel anxiety. The moment you feel anxiety, your brain's checking in with your body and saying, yeah, you're pretty anxious. So then you start thinking more corresponding thoughts equal to how you feel. Well, the redundancy of that cycle conditions the body. When it comes time to change, a person steps into that river of change and they make a different choice, and all of a sudden they don't feel the same way. So the body says, well, you've been doing this for 35 years. You're going to just stop suffering and stop feeling guilty and stop feeling shameful, and you're not going to complain or blame or make excuses or feel sorry for yourself. Well, the body's in the unknown. So the body says, I want to return back to familiar territory. So the body starts influencing the mind, and it says, start tomorrow. You're too much like your mother. You'll never change. This isn't going to work for you. This doesn't feel right. And so if you respond to that thought as if it's true, that same thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience, which will produce the same emotion. We have a huge frontal lobe, and it's 40% of our entire brain. And most people, when they have a thought, they just think that that's the truth. And I think one of my greatest realizations in my own journey was just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So if you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and we do, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, and you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, your life's not going to change very much, because the same thought leads to the same choice leads to the same behavior creates the same experience, and the same experience produces the same emotion. And so then the act of becoming conscious of this process to begin to become more aware of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. It's called metacognition. And so then, why is that important? Because the more conscious you become of those unconscious states of mind and body, the less likely you're going to go unconscious during the day. And that thought is not going to slip by your awareness unchecked, because it means to know thyself. The word meditation means to become familiar with. So as you become familiar with the thoughts, the behaviors, and the emotions of the old self, you're retiring that old self. As you fire and wire new thoughts and condition the body into a new emotional state, if you do that enough times, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So it's so important, just like a garden. If you're planting a garden, you got to get rid of the weeds. You got to take the plants from the past year and you got to pull them out. The rocks that sift to the top that are like our emotional blocks, they have to be removed. The soil has to be tenderized and broken down. We have to make room to plant a new garden. So primarily, we learn the most about ourselves and others when we're uncomfortable. Because the moment you move into that uncomfortable state, normally a program jumps in. When that program jumps in, it's because the person doesn't want to be in the present moment and engage it consciously. So when you teach people how to do that with a meditative process, turns out that when they're in their life, they're less likely to emotionally react. They're less likely to be so rigid and believe the thoughts they were thinking. They're more aware of when they go unconscious back into a habit, and that is what starts the process of change. And so we have to unlearn before we relearn. We have to break the habit of the old self before we reinvent a new self. We have to prune synaptic connections and sprout new connections. We have to unfire and unwire and refire and rewire. We have to unmemorize emotions that are stored in the body, then recondition the body to a new mind and to a new emotion, like deprogram and reprogram. That's the act, and it's a two-step process. The stronger the emotional reaction you have to some experience in your life, the higher the emotional quotient, the more you pay attention to the cause. And the moment the brain puts all of its attention on the cause, it takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. So long-term memories are created from very highly emotional experiences. So what happens then is that people think neurologically within the circuitry of that experience, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And so when you have an emotional reaction to someone or something, most people think that they can't control their emotional reaction. Well, it turns out if you allow that emotional reaction, it's called a refractory period, to last for hours or days, that's called a mood. say to someone, hey, what's up? You say, I'm in a mood. Well, why are you in a mood? Well, I had this thing happen to me 5 days ago, and I'm having one long emotional reaction. If you keep that same emotional reaction going on for weeks or months, that's called temperament. Why is he so bitter? I don't know, let's ask him. Why is he so bitter? Why are you bitter? Well, I had this thing happen to me 9 months ago. And if you keep that same emotional reaction going on for years on end, that's called a personality trait. And so learning how to shorten your refractory period of emotional reactions is really where the work starts. So then people, when they have an event, what they do is they keep recalling the event because the emotions of stress hormones, the survival emotions, are saying pay attention to what happened because you want to be prepared if it happens again. Turns out most people spend 70% of their life living in survival and living in stress. So they're always anticipating the worst case scenario based on a past experience. And they're literally, out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field, they're selecting the worst possible outcome and they're beginning to emotionally embrace it with fear. And they're conditioning their body into a state of fear. Do that enough times, body has a panic attack without you. You can't even predict it because it's programmed subconsciously. So then you say to the person, why are you this way? And they'll say, I am this way because of this event that happened to me 15 or 20 years ago. And what that means from a biological standpoint is that they haven't been able to change since that event. So then the emotions from the experience tend to give the body and the brain a rush of energy. So people become addicted to the rush of those emotions, and they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their limitation, so at least they can feel something. So now when it comes time to change, you say to the person, why are you this way? Well, every time they recall the event, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event is occurring, firing and wiring the same circuits and sending the same emotional signature to the body. Well, what's the relevance behind that? Well, your body is the unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between the experience that's creating the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. So the body's believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so then when those emotions influence certain thoughts, and they do, and then those thoughts create the same emotions, and those same emotions influence the same thoughts, now the entire person's state of being is in the past. So then the hardest part about change is not making the same choices you did the day before, period. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready because it's going to feel uncomfortable.
Jeg kan ikke lade være med at lægge mærke til, at vi på mange områder allerede er nået dertil, hvor det er teknologien, der styrer os og ikke omvendt. Og det her, det sker i sådan nogle små skridt, alt imens vi bliver underholdt.
Snapstreaks count the number of days in a row you've sent a message back and forth with someone. So if I have a best friend and we've been chatting every day for 100 days, I see a little fireball and the number 100 next to it. And what that does is they've just created something now I don't want to lose. Because I have a streak going, I've got 100 days, and now if I don't send them a message tomorrow, I'm going to lose the whole thing. And when you're a kid, actually, this has a really big impact on you. I'm not making this up. There's a woman named Emily Weinstein at Harvard who studied the effects of Snapchat and Snapstreaks on kids by accident. It emerged in her interviews. And she found out that kids, when they go on vacation, they have to give their password to up to 5 other friends to actually have them send messages while they're gone on vacation because they're so worried about losing their Snapstreaks. In fact, a lot of kids, they wake up and they see these 30 contacts with different streaks and they have to just take pictures of floors and ceilings just to kind of get through all these Snapstreaks so they don't lose any of them. So we have to ask, when Snapchat is designing a feature like Snapstreaks, are they doing that because they most want to help kids empower them to live their lives? Or are they doing that because it's really good at getting their attention? And when we're parents and we see kids using it this way, we have to recognize there's something very different going on here. This was not true in the 1970s when we had a neutral telephone that we would choose to use when we wanted to use it. There are now 1,000 people behind our new telephone, which is, say, Snapchat, that's being designed and updated every day to be more compelling at addicting and holding on to people's attention. And it's not good for us. I mean, I think we can all feel it. We become more and more on the treadmill to the number of likes or feedback we get basically from social media and start tying our own approval, our own self-worth to how much attention we get from other people. I mean, even for me, I notice that, you know, if I post something, it does affect me whether or not I have a lot of likes or few likes. And it's hard to really, if you think about it, and get to the felt sense of my self-worth is completely independent of that. That's a subtle thing to hold. And developmentally, children are more vulnerable to their self-worth being externalized like this. And the problem is that, you know, there's always been as well ways of externalizing our self-worth in terms of how much money we have in our bank account or in terms of how many friends we have. But now the externalization of our self-worth is controlled by a handful of companies whose goals are different than our goals. They're not evil companies. They just have the different goal of maximizing attention. And our goals are not that. But the problem is that their goals become our goals. This is what's actually so dangerous, is that their goals of engaging us the most by having us care about likes become our goals. We actually wake up in the morning as sovereign human beings and we start caring about the number of likes we got as if that's our goal in life. That becomes our goal. And it's as if we've been infected. It's if they've drilled a hole in the back of our head and now they've injected the virus and now we walk around searching for feedback using social media. And they won if that happens. And again, it's not because they're evil, but they're in a different game. They're trying to maximize attention. But we have to ask a much deeper question, which is, what do we want in our lives and what is our self-worth actually tied to? And maybe it's being virtuous or being a good friend or being, caring about what matters or living by our values. There's a whole bunch of things that we could define for ourselves. And I think the less people have defined their own values, the more vulnerable they are to someone else coming in and giving them their values. And to fix that, we're going to need to talk about different kinds of metrics, different ways of measuring success and monetizing success. So instead of making more money the more time we get, we instead make more money the more we've helped you in your life.
Spørgsmålet er blandt andet, om teknologien, og særligt den digitale verden, er med til at forbedre vores liv, vores velvære og vores livskvalitet, eller om det i virkeligheden er med til at fordumme, kontrollere og slavebinde os alle sammen. Men det er i virkeligheden nok ikke så enkelt.
From the other end of the couch, like, what the hell? Turn and talk. I'm right here. Just turn and talk. The other day we're in the mall. I go, we got to go to the second level. My son goes, no, we can't go. I go, we just go. No, the escalator's broken. It's called stairs now, kid. Just go up the stairs. What the hell? So lazy. My daughter, we had to figure something out for her school project. And I go, okay, let's Google it. She goes, I'm too tired to turn the computer on. What the hell? What the hell? When I was a kid, we used to walk 8 blocks, take a bus for 2 miles to go to the library to find out who won the frickin' War of 1812.
You ever think about, like, if you went back in time, you're like, oh man, like, how would you explain inventions of today to, like, cavemen? You know, that's what I do. Like, I'm just sit there and I'm like, man, like, if you had to explain, like, the car or, like, the plane, you know what I mean? Or, like, the TV would be really hard. The internet would be impossible, right? Because the internet, I don't know if you know this, but 80% of the internet is porn. 80%, this guy knows, apparently. 80% of the internet is porn, which means we're wasting 20% of the internet on actual knowledge and information. Crazy, I know. Why waste it like that? Like, people always talk about it like how it's great. Oh, like, we're all connected now. Everybody's, like, connected. It's not true, man. None of that is stuff. We're all isolated, I think, more. Because we're, like, on our phones, like, on our iPods. Like, no one talks to anyone anymore. Like, YouTube, like, oh, I'm going to share, like, this video I made, like, some cute video. And the first 3 comments are like, oh, it's pretty good. It's all right. Next one's like, this one sucks, man. This guy's an idiot. His mom's a whore, man. I slept with his mom, man. His mom's a Jew. Screw the Jews. Screw the Muslims. Screw the blacks. Screw the fags. I'm like, any comment past 100 is just like this hate-filled vitriol. You're like, what the hell? It's a video about cats. What happened to the frick? Why is this relevant?